I think there's an appreciation for not only just eating out, but I think a sense of service. Just the act of service of having a drink made for you, having someone, greet you and like serve on you is like, I think that's what we all miss during lockdown, and just the act of hospitality.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. 2020 will be remembered as one of the most challenging for just about everyone on the globe. The hospitality sector has had its hardest year on record, and the true impact is yet to be fully realised. But amongst the heartache, the closures of businesses, and the loss of employment, there have been some amazing stories of success and new avenues of opportunity too. Trisha Greentree is the executive chef of 10 William Street and Fratelli Paradiso. Trisha, how are you going?
I'm good, thanks.
You've recently been announced as the executive chef of both of those amazing institutions in Sydney. How does that feel?
It feels good and natural. It was definitely something that wasn't planned, and did come out of the COVID kind of break, I guess. So yeah, it was definitely one positive that came out of a restructure and like a rethink of the businesses.
Well, you were heading the kitchen at 10 William Street prior to the pandemic, and it's celebrating 10 years this year and Fratelli 20 years. That's pretty incredible for restaurants.
It is, and I feel very lucky and fortunate to be a part of like the celebration. Well, not really. We haven't really celebrated. We chose not to because of just the year that has been, but just more so looking, just happy to like be on board and like bring it into the next chapter.
Can you take us back to early on when the pandemic happened and sort of what impact it had on 10 William Street and your role there?
So I was actually just transitioning back into the kitchen after a 4-month maternity leave. And that was quite rough as it was because, being a new mother, the bushfires, and I was living in Tamarama at that time, and an Art Deco building, and the smoke was really was just a horrible living situation with a newborn. So like it was already just like a frantic time at that stage, and then I decided to go back to my mother's house and just kind of chill up there for a bit, and then started to think about work again, and I phased myself, started to come back around end of February, March, doing a couple of days a week, and then, it was simmering around that time. COVID was happening in Italy and Asia, and yeah, and then I think I was back for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll close down.
Wow.
So it was
Wow.
it was a really crazy time, and like I was actually just looking through my photos and talking to the boys about, I can't remember because I think I've just blocked it out, like what happened, because it was just so chaotic. But there was a few good takeaways. Like it was good to be back with everyone during that time, and just kind of all I remember is just like taking it day by day and managing it daily. And I just remember being happy to be back in the kitchen with my team, my small team that I like. We're all very close, and we're all just so happy to be reignited again. And then to go through that with them was just, it was kind of bittersweet, because I think, I was back and I could take charge in a sense and kind of just be in the storm with everyone while expressing milk as well. It was just hectic.
What was it like for you? What was the feeling? Was there a bit of relief as well, given that you'd just become a mother only a few months earlier, and did it allow you more time?
Oh yeah, like once we decided to close, and we definitely decided to close before the government shut everything down. It was definitely for the health and safety of everyone that worked there, but also our customers. We just didn't really feel safe to operate. And because it is such a business that is set in stone, we didn't really want to pivot the business. And we did do takeaway as such, but it just was, I mean, if you know 10 William Street, like the kitchen and the setup is not really set up for packaging and all of that. But we did do,
It's one of the smallest kitchens in Sydney, I think.
it is, and we
Yeah.
did take away mainly for the locals, and everyone supported us and it was great. But, you know, we did decide to close, and after like packing everything down, like of course, when it all settled in, I then did realize that I should just, you know, enjoy this time and just look after my loved ones and my baby and just enjoy the extended maternity leave. So it was actually a blessing. It was, yeah.
You've had the chance to reopen again. What's it like trying to juggle motherhood and two, such influential restaurants?
It is very difficult. I remember, and so like during that time, it was during COVID when we started to rethink to open up the businesses again. It was that time when the boys had asked me to take on the new role, and you know, it was. I'm still figuring it out. I'm still figuring it out every day, every week, but you know, I'm really lucky that I have such strong support from the boys that allows me flexibility. I have like amazing teams and people that just we just make it work for everyone and myself, and it just yeah, it's just learning every day. I think I in during that lockdown I did Google a few times if there were any other chefs out there that did motherhood, and I couldn't find anyone, like if there was any interviews or like anyone, because I don't know any female chefs that have gone through motherhood except for one, Alex Herbert, who I worked for. And I just, you know, like her voice just always flashed back in my mind, you know, when I was trying to manage everything. But there hasn't, I don't know many, but yeah, I've just trying to figure it out as I go.
You've worked with some incredible chefs and at amazing restaurants. Can you tell us a bit about the path that you've taken as a chef?
Well, I started later at 25 years old after completing university and traveling and working overseas. And then I came back and I decided to work with my hands instead of in academia. And yeah, I landed in Alex Herbert's kitchen at Bird Cow Fish. I remember just reading the newspaper. I was actually working at a friend's cafe at Kofa, and I just, you know, back then it was all in the paper, so I saw an apprenticeship ad, and I just called her up and we had a talk, and you know, she told me about her experience and like where she's come from, and she kind of had a similar background to me, starting late and whatnot. And so yeah, I did a trial and started with her, and I was with her for like over a year. And then after then, I did a few stages. I was staged at the Royal Mail and met Dan Hunter. I really wanted a job with him at that time, but I just felt that Dunkeld wasn't the place for me. But I was definitely influenced and inspired by that time there. And then after that, I traveled and I went to Los Angeles and I staged and then ended up working at a place called Red Medicine by Jordan Kahn, who now has Vespertine. And I just that was a really good experience for me because I loved the produce. My family, my on my mother's side is all based in Los Angeles, so I had a connection already to the place. So it was an easy transition to move to be in America and work. Yeah, and I loved it, and I stayed there for a few years, and then after that, I went to Denmark. I can't even remember now. It's like like I started in Denmark, and then I've opened up. I spent some time at. I opened up Mr. Wong's with Dan Hong, Jiao Yu, Victor, and that was a lot of fun. I really wanted to learn the woks, and so yeah, I just threw myself in the deep end there and learnt off Jowett, and that was a great year of just everyone kind of just. It was a great opening team. I had a lot of fun there, and we're all still very close. And then after that, I went to Bray. and I spent, a good amount of years there, opening it with Dan. And then after I left the kitchen, I worked on the farm. And then I did the book tour with him, and then I spent some time in Melbourne. But I could never find my place in Melbourne. I just couldn't really find the restaurant for me. And then, yes, I spent some time at Franklin with Annalise for a bit of a hiatus, and then the boys contacted me about 10 William Street, and I decided to come back to Sydney and start that.
Dan Hunter's an amazingly influential chef on Australia's culinary landscape. What was it like working in that kitchen?
There's definitely not enough time to go through all the stories, but it was a wild ride. I was very fortunate to already know Dan from the Royal Mail, and it was just one of those timing things. Like, there was four of us that opened the kitchen, and it was like you kind of had to be a certain character, a self-starter, a self-motivator, like loved a challenge, because the way that we started that whole business and endeavor and restaurant was just kind of, when I look back at it, wild. like like I remember the first barbecue that we had outside was like a little home barbecue, and the setup station was on a wheelbarrow, and it was just like you had to see joy in that, like even in like joy in cooking like that, but at a higher level, as the highest that you could go, basically. And I've always been up for that challenge, and just seeing kind of the joy in situations that might seem struggling or like stressful to others. But yeah, no, it was huge. I mean, one of the greatest joys too was just seeing how the restaurant grew, and like the team, but also like the menu, and then the farm. That was amazing. And like now, like you just see trees that are like 6 years old that are completely fruiting, but you planted that, and it's amazing.
You've worked at such different restaurants and with such different cuisines. How did you feel when the guys at 10 William Street contacted you about cooking Italian food?
Um, well, I mean, if I was going to eat European food, I definitely always tend towards the Italian side. And pasta essentially is noodles. And I do love the simplicity of Italian food, like with the produce. And I was just lucky enough that I had traveled to Italy the year before and found lots of inspiration and just felt really at home there. And I was, so it was not so daunting. You just got to keep it simple, I think, and then start from there. Like, I just knew that I would strip everything back, go to the core of things, and then build myself up in that way, do my research and whatnot. Yeah.
10 William Street is often on the list of for must visits when you go to Sydney because it's just such a special spot. Uh, and there's been dishes on the menu there that have sort of stood the test of time, like the pretzel. Have you had pressure to keep some dishes on the menu?
Yes, the pretzel and the tiramisu came with the job contract, and the ragu actually, but I actually got that off. I didn't find it appropriate to have a ragu on the whole year round, especially in summer. But yeah, the pretzel's still on, and the tiramisu still is the same. The tiramisu has been tweaked, like with ingredients wise, but it's only to enhance it, not shy away from the original recipe.
You mentioned how you love the simplicity of Italian cuisine. Could you run us through a dish that you have on the menu at the moment that you really love?
We have. Let me just apply a menu. We've got. There's so many. Like, I change the menu every week. It's hard to keep up sometimes. Well, I was just think of the pasta. Okay, well, so at the moment, well, last week we had ravioli with green peas and like a green verde sauce, which was delicious. But the peas are actually coming too mature now for like a pea dish. So we've changed. I've moved on to a smoky tomato sugo because I just can't wait for tomatoes. So I'm just like I just can't wait. I'm just like it's already warm. We just need sugo on the menu. Like, so yeah, that's ravioli with that, and then we have a rolled white peachy dough with like a Puglia seafood inspired with burnt chili and pancrettato. Yeah, I mean we do love pasta a lot. Yeah, yeah, we do a lot of pasta and change it pretty much weekly. Ever since COVID, actually, like it was kind of going into like a 2 week kind of change, but after COVID, we were changing it definitely like daily and weekly because we just came back with so much more inspiration and yeah, just so many things that we wanted to cook.
And now you're the executive chef of 10 William Street and Fratelli Paradiso. How different is your role, and how differently do you treat the venues?
Well, lucky I brought one of the chefs with me that was at 10 William over to Fratelli, so that was a easy transition for him to kind of get everything into gear with the kitchen and like just help me communicate when I'm not here the who I am and how what our vision is. And obviously it's I mean the menu, changing a menu and suppliers and producers, that's all just a lot of paperwork and legwork. But I think the hardest challenge is getting into cooks' minds and chefs' minds and teaching them a different way of seeing ingredients and cooking a different way. That's definitely been the biggest challenge. But slowly but surely, over time, once they get to know you and they cook your recipes and dishes and see how what culture you like to cook in, then it takes time. It's only been about 6 weeks now, but I would say in about 6 months they will definitely know. Like it will be, you know, it feels like mine now just after 6 weeks because all the produce has changed over, the larder has changed over. I'm using all my suppliers and like farmers, so it definitely feels like home. But there's still a few goals to kick in terms of the vision.
Both of those venues are really rowdy, lively, energetic spaces in which to share food in. What are the restaurants like at the moment, and what's it like in Sydney? Is it relatively back to normal? How does it feel in those spaces?
Fratelli is almost it's not we're definitely have reduced days and we haven't, so we do no more breakfast. Lunches are only on Friday, Saturday. We are looking to open up more services, but it's just a matter of finding staff. The numbers are quite back to normal, or I mean Fratelli is so lucky that it's got such a huge client base and regular and supportive regulars that as soon as you open, it's fine and it feels quite back to normal. It's just not that huge 7-day operation anymore. And then as for 10 William Street, because it was a bar, and now we're doing bookings and limited numbers. It's more of it's the vibe has turned more of it into a restaurant more so than a lively bar. I mean, it can still get, I mean, yeah, so it's a little hard because you can't have anyone standing around the bar. Everyone has to be seated. Everyone's spaced out. But we're lucky because everyone's spending a little bit more. We're doing maybe we're doing the same amount of covers almost, but just staggered bookings. It's a really tricky game to play trying to have a sustainable business in this time. But yeah, it's as long as everyone can like have bookings and accept bookings, like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for a light dinner, like then it can work. It's just that the vibe's a little bit quieter. It's not as rowdy.
Melbourne went through a pretty extensive lockdown, and how does it make you feel about the potential of that happening again?
Oh well, I hope it doesn't. I mean, I was very sensitive when it was happening to Victoria. I had planned a trip for my birthday back down to Bray, and obviously I've got a lot of friends down there. And so, like, I was very, sensitive and cautious not to, put things out there and like small little victories and celebrations we might have here in Sydney on social media, because I just thought, people are suffering in our industry. It's a bit, we're in Sydney and there's nothing, like, we're just continuing on as normal. But yeah, it's definitely always in the back of your mind that I think now we're just have become so regulated and so cautious, and everything's in place now, like with all COVID standards practices, that that if it does pop up again, you are aware and you kind of know what to do. So it's not. I don't think it will be. Before, we had no idea. Like, it was just completely like, what is going to happen? Now, we have inspectors come by the restaurant at least once a week in Potts Point to check all the QR codes, check, all the hygiene practices. And so New South Wales is it's a nanny state. So in a way, it's kind of like benefited New South Wales because we are so regulated. But yeah, that's the only plus side for the nanny state, I think.
What's your sense from guests coming in? Do you think people appreciate restaurants more since the lockdown and that they've got restaurants back?
Absolutely, I do. I think there's an appreciation for not only just eating out, but I think a sense of service. You know, I think a sense of place and rest, like just going out to a restaurant and being serviced on. You can't, just the act of service of having a drink made for you, having someone, greet you and like serve on you is like, I think that's what we all miss during lockdown, and just the act of hospitality.
A lot of people on the series have talked about how much they've changed because of these circumstances, but you've had two big changes this year, one becoming a parent for the first time and then also the pandemic. Have you changed this year because of what's happened?
I have, yes. It's the pandemic really, it kind of set in stone more conviction in myself and who I am and what I want to do and why I cook, I think. For sure. Like, it just cut away all the bullshit.
You mentioned earlier that you sort of started late to chefing around 25 after going to uni. And was food pretty important in your life growing up? Was there influences early on that led you to eventually become a chef?
Yes, I was very lucky to grow up in a house with my mother, who's a very good cook. We had a vegetable garden, and she mainly cooked Filipino food. She was very attentive and very anal with her mise en place. So everything was, like, I had to pat dry lettuce leaves and peel mushrooms and like perfectly peel garlic. And so, like, I had a lot of like informal training at home from her. And like, one of my jobs was like, if she was in the shower, I had to skim, stocks with like a chinois, like the finest chinois. And she got that from her father. So I was lucky that I learnt just a natural way of cooking at the home, and cooking with your senses as well. Like, when I was young, she taught me, cooking an egg. If I cracked an egg and she heard that the oil was too hot, she would just yell at me. Like, Like, 'cause it wasn't like she didn't like the crispy edge. She like a blonde white finish. And so like those sort of things, like you bring to a professional kitchen. You cook with your ears, you cook with your eyes, you cook with all your senses, and you realize that that's kind of a head start to some people that might just cook with just their hands. So yeah, like I kind of used, it was just lucky that, I could easily transition just from the love of cooking at home to a professional, in a professional sense.
Your CV is very global. You've been all over the planet, and as you mentioned earlier, you travelled to Italy a year before getting the job at 10 William Street. How do you feel about international travel at the moment, and how important it is to a career like yours?
Well, it's interesting because I talk about this with some young chefs that I have at the moment who were meant to go overseas and work and now are stuck here. And it's just interesting, like the generational differences that we have. Like they have, they're so advanced in, and their access to information and their opportunities and their rights and, fair work and, gender equality and all of these things. But now you know, they're unable to travel. So it was just interesting, like reflecting on that and how we were so free to travel back, before all of this. And I think it is definitely important. But I like with travel, like the best thing is that you just putting yourself in a different environment and adapting and becoming flexible. It doesn't matter like where you are in the world. You can travel so far, so wide, but yet the whole experience is internal, and you can put in that experience in any kitchen. I feel like it doesn't have to be on the other side of the world if you can't get there or don't have that opportunity. I think that it's a mindset to just take every opportunity as a learning experience and taking yourself out of your comfort zone into a different kitchen and seeing what you can learn in another. And it doesn't have to be a formal kitchen. It can be someone else's, grandmother's house or someone's house, and or a producer or a farmer. Like it's just about a constant curiosity and learning. And yeah, I still think that you can learn just as much and experiences just as much, just no matter where you are.
There's been a lot of discussion about the changing culture within the hospitality sector and the old days of 80-hour weeks and abuse, and also a male dominated industry. What's your experience been like through your career?
Um, I've definitely witnessed a lot, but I think, I've worked a lot of hours. I've done it all, but I think we've moved to definitely a great place. Strangely enough, for some reason now I feel like I have a lot of more females applying for work than males. The out. I'm all for the work-life balance. We only mainly do 4 days on, 3 days off. We're all very healthy. Like we all either do Pilates, yoga, swimming, surfing, and I encourage that a lot. With like, it's and it's great. Like I think it's very important, and I don't think that it has to. You don't. It's not beneficial for anyone sustainably to be overworked or being uncomfortable in a kitchen because of any reason whatsoever. But yeah, I think it's a thing in the past, and I hope it stays there. And I think it will, for sure. Especially working with some young people now, like there's no way that it will go back, which is really hopeful and inspiring for me because I feel like my experiences and what we've done and like the hard work that we've put in and things I've stood up for and has paved the way for it to allow it to be what it is now. And I celebrate in that.
There's been a lot of talk about this being a time where a lot of corrections can happen in the restaurant industry that some thought were a bit broken in the former model. Do you think we'll see different restaurants and different offerings as we move forward out of COVID?
Yeah, like there's, like restaurants that are pivoted and found new business avenues that were successful and are going to stick with it. I think it's amazing. Like, I just know the guys from Ragazzi have opened up a pasta shop in the city, and that all came,
Wow.
yeah, and
Really?
that all came from the takeaway packs, and so they opened up a little deli pasta shop called Ciao Fabrica, and it's amazing. And like, I haven't, I don't know for certain if the idea came before COVID or whatnot, but it's just it's brilliant because now you can get restaurant quality pasta, take home, and I things like that have stayed. I know Josh at the fish butchery, he's continued with his home takeaway packs, which I think are great. And like, I'm always on the lookout for restaurants in Melbourne that are offering things that they can send. I love that idea too. Like, if I could get, things sent from Bray up here just for a present or for myself, like, I love that. And like how Victor Leong's doing the eggplant sauce bottled, all these things that help their business because of the different avenues they've had to explore. I think it's a positive thing.
After the year we've had, what are your hopes for the summer?
I hope for a festive summer, lots of celebration to say goodbye to 2020. Like, I think we're all nearing that point now. It's like, oh my God, we've just got one more month and then we can say goodbye. Like, and I feel like that's kind of, here in Sydney, I feel like that's in the air of like, the sun's out, we can go to the beach. As of this week, actually, they're changing the meters from 1.5 to 1.2. So it could mean an extra body or here and there in the venue. So it just seems more festive and more relaxed. And I think with the records of no cases, I think everyone's just going to like just enjoy the last bit of this year and just say goodbye to it.
Well, Trisha, you're bloody amazing, and taking on two institutions like that is incredible. In the year that you also became a mother, hats off to you, and throw in a pandemic while you're at it. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds. Please keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.